How old are you?
40.
Number of the teeth that have decayed cavities in them. Say, you're a fine, big, strong fella. How old are you? Why, you look as though you were a giant. My. Where'd you come from? Opera. Well, that's the place. The most universal disease in the world is the decay of the teeth. And unfortunately, we have not known the cause until we've gone to the primitive people to find how they prevent tooth decay. Our difficulty is that we are adding too much white flour and sugar and do not get enough of the foods that carry the minerals and vitamins. When the primitive people adopt the food of modern civilization, their teeth decay just as ours do. I've spent several years studying the primitive people in various parts of the world, and I've come as a missionary from them to the people of modern civilization. And I beg of you to learn of their accumulated wisdom. And if you do, you too can have strong, healthy bodies without so much disease as we suffer from these days.
I mean, I've got to guess. I know exactly what I want to talk about. But with you, there's a problem. I mean, there's so much we could talk about. We could talk about Dr. Weston Price. We could talk about the foundation, why it was set up. We could talk about 5G. We could talk about your 11 wise principles. We could talk about raw milk. We could talk about vaccines, homeopathy.
Absence of virus.
Absence of virus. I mean, there's just too much. I mean,
virus denial.
Where do we begin?
Yeah.
Should we just do a little recap? I know you're probably sick to death repeating this, but believe it or not, there are still some people out there who've never heard of Dr. Weston Price. Should we just spend a few minutes explaining to the audience who that is?
Name.
Yeah. Who is Dr. Weston Price?
He really was the most important researcher in the field of nutrition ever. And he wrote a book called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, which was about his studies of healthy traditional people. He was a dentist in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and every summer he and his wife would go and study a isolated group of people, first of all, to look at their dental health. And he found 14 groups where everyone had perfect teeth, no cavities, no infection, and plenty of space in the jaw, nice wide jaws for the teeth to come in straight. And so they had perfect teeth, and by from what he could tell, perfect overall health. Childbirth was really easy. Infertility was non-existent. No degenerative disease or infectious disease. So then the second thing he wanted to know was, what were these people eating? What kind of diet supported this perfect health? And the diets were, of course, no processed foods. There were no vegetarian diets. They all contained animal foods. But the key principle was very high in vitamins and minerals, at least 4 times higher in minerals than the American diet of his day. But the real surprising thing is how high they were in what we call the fat-soluble vitamins, vitamins A, D, and K, and there's not many places we can get these vitamins. Animal fats from grass-fed animals, especially butter, egg yolks from pastured hens, seafood like shellfish, fish eggs is a fantastic source, and then the organ meats, so liver and other organ meats. And of course, we don't eat those today as much as we used to. So one of our goals is to help people learn to like liver, make liver taste good. So we advocate a nutrient-dense diet, lots of butter, raw milk, because when the milk is raw, all the nutrients are easily absorbed. And for people to learn to eat shellfish, seafood, and organ meats. So that's it in a nutshell. And then also proper preparation releases nutrients. For example, dark leafy greens, we do not recommend juicing them because it's very difficult to get at the nutrients in raw leafy greens. We advocate cooking them and pressing out the juice because there's a lot of anti-nutrients in the juice, and then putting butter on them because you need the vitamin A in the butter to absorb the minerals in the vegetables. So it's not just saying, eat your greens. It's how you prepare those greens.
Cass, did Weston Price ever come across a group, tribe, whatever you want to call it, who were exclusively vegan?
Oh, no. And he writes about this. He had said he had hoped to find a culture that was living entirely on plant foods. And he had to admit that he did not find such a culture. Now, the amount of plant foods in those diets ranged widely from as low as 1 or 2% to 70, 80%. But there were no vegetarian groups. And in fact, all of the so-called sacred foods, the foods considered very important for having healthy babies, they were all animal foods.
Interesting. And the thing is, I eat everything, but it's very heavily, animal and animal fat based diet, with nuts and some vegetables. But there's a big movement, not just the vegan save the planet kind of group, but actually a genuine health vegan movement. And they believe that if you live a wholesome, whole food vegan diet, that's the optimal diet
for health.
For health.
Yeah, there was a study done, I think it was 2011, in Australia, where everyone did a food questionnaire, and they were self-reporting either eating animal foods or not eating animal foods. And the ones who did not eat any animal foods self-reported, and what their ailments were, and then they compared them to the animal food eaters. And the ones who were avoiding animal foods had more tooth decay, more mental illness, a lower quality of life. They were sick more often, more allergies. But the really surprising thing was they had more cancer. And they tell you that the vegetarian diet's going to prevent cancer, but that's not what they found. The ones who were avoiding the animal foods had more cancer. My husband had 5 children, and one died in her young adult years, and she was the only one who was a vegetarian. And she died of breast cancer.
Okay, right. Well, let's move on. I mean, I think Weston Price was incredible because he was a dentist. He's looking at people's teeth and thinking what's going wrong and that's, I think sometimes the best advances come from people outside of a group. For example, electricity was never going to be made by people who made candles.
True.
They would have no interest in that.
Yeah, that's right.
It never comes from the center of a group. It always comes from the fringe and periphery.
Yes.
So here you have a dentist looking at teeth, and suddenly from that, he's now extrapolated and looking at health and mental well-being and physical well-being, completely different. But, back then and his time in the 1920s and 30s, the fact that he was off, an American out to the Scottish Hebrides and to see the Aborigines and the Africans and the South America. Yeah. I mean, he was quite an explorer.
He was, and these studies occurred at just the right time. There still were these isolated people, but now we had the transportation to get them, and we had a camera, and we had the camera, and he took photos. And when you see these photos, it just changes you.
Yeah.
And, today there have been some books written about the epidemic of narrow jaws, and trying to figure out what's causing these narrow jaws. And in Dr. Price's day, they said this was race mixing. The race mixing caused a degeneration. And Dr. Price was very quick to dismiss that. He said he'd seen people of all kinds of mixtures, and if they were on their traditional food, they had beautiful faces and good physiques. And if they were adopted the displacing foods of modern commerce, as he called them, they had the narrow face and all kinds of health problems and cavities, everything. So where was it? Anyway, so today the reason they give is we have these narrow jaws because we're eating soft food.
So, there's another thing as well, and I'll never forget it. I remember I was doing a surgical placement, and part of my surgical placement, I had to also spend some time with the anaesthetist, and when he was anaesthetizing the patients, and this is in Inverclyde Hospital, and it was a very deprived area in Scotland, and he was like, "Oh, look at this lady, typical micrognathia." And I'll show you what that means. That's not narrow jaw per se. It's a recessed kind of jaw. It's like this, basically. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
Where the jaw is very recessed. And you went, oh, this typical west of Scotland jaw. And that's because when I was growing up, people were not eating healthy diets in the West End of Scotland. Scotland. It was very poor diet, very, very deprived areas, and they're just eating, processed stuff. And I think this is what happens when you're eating suboptimal diets. It changes your morphology of your jaw.
Yeah, well, they call that the Habsburg chin because the Habsburg royal family had chins like that.
Ah, okay.
Because they were eating so much sugar.
Oh, well, that would make sense, wouldn't it? Because sugar was quite prized, wasn't it?
Yeah, and of course only the rich could afford it.
Wow, how times change, hey?
Now wealthy people know better and they try to stay off of sugar, and the poor people who are eating tons of sugar.
And when Weston Price was going around talking about the diet, the optimal diet, I mean, there was no vegan movement to speak of.
Yes,
It wasn't
was.
like he was going out against an agenda. It was just like he was.
I'm sorry, I have to correct you there. It was
really?
Even then. Oh yes.
Oh wow! Tell me.
And well, there was religious groups. I believe the Seventh Day Adventists, for example, were pushing this, and he says, I'm gonna. If this is such a great diet, I ought to be able to find people who are doing very well without any animal foods. But he didn't find any.
Oh, you're right. You're talking about the Kellogg's and whatnot and creating their cereals.
Yes. Those crazy guys. And also there was another one, Sylvester Graham, who invented the graham cracker. Yeah.
Right.
And he was into wheat bran and high fiber foods and everything. Yeah. These guys were absolute nutcases, but they had a big influence. And that was back in his day, a year earlier even.
Right. I heard that the Seventh-day Adventists were even capturing the college or whatever of nutrition. Is that right? Or diet?
Well, they definitely influenced the American Dietary Guidelines.
That's it.
And the first head of the American Dietitian Association, ADA, was a Seventh-day Adventist. So basically the diet that we're imposing on our children and on people in institutions and prisons are getting this religious diet. That's why it's there.
Yeah, apparently it quells your urges and...
Yes, well, that's why I say these guys were nutcases. Like Kellogg never slept with his wife. They had separate bedrooms. And they thought that sex was what made people go crazy. And that was what caused disease. And so they thought if you ate meat, you'd be too interested in sex. So that's why they wanted this high grain diet.
Wow.
And Sylvester Graham was even worse. Oh, he was a terrible man.
Wow. So tell me so he passed away. Weston Price passed away in the 40s.
When was 1948, yes.
Yeah, when was the foundation set up?
Well, we founded the foundation in 1999. Our first journal and our first conference was in 1900. It was in 2000. Excuse me. It was in the year 2000.
And what made you set it up?
Well, it was a number of things, but my feeling that Weston Price was not being represented well. People didn't know who he was. This dietary wisdom was just languishing, and if you knew about it, it was just like a special club. But I just felt so strongly that this information had to get out to the public.
Yeah.
So, for example, we have a huge website, and we've never charged a fee to get into our website. It's for everybody.
Well, it's brilliant.
Membership is still $40, the same as when we started. So.
Well, it is packed with resources, and I'm going to put it up in the show notes, and everybody can see it. It's just fantastic. There's lots of wonderful information. I've been to so many websites where it's like, if you want to know, click this and buy this and blah blah blah.
Yeah, no, we don't do that.
And so I just want to say thanks. Thank you. There's nothing gimmicky about your website.
And we have a lot of materials at very low cost too, flyers and booklets and things like that.
Yeah. No, I can tell, like, you're genuinely out there to educate the population about what it means to really be healthy and what to eat. And, unfortunately, you're up against a massive machinery and beast, big agri, big food, big pharma. They're all pushing a completely different message. And then there's little old you, but
I'll give you an example. There was just a big headline. This new study shows you live longer if you eat seed oils and if you avoid butter. So we just looked at this study, and that wasn't me, somebody else. And they took these dietary recall studies, which are notoriously inaccurate. But the butter group it included margarine. And the seed oil group included olive oil. So they were comparing two mixtures of good and bad things. There's just nothing you can conclude from this study.
Yeah, I've done a few podcasts debunking modern science and the corruption of science.
It's totally corrupt. I just looked at another one where they said that high-fat diets were bad for your brain and would give you Alzheimer's and everything. So I looked at the study, and the one that had the problems, yes, it was a higher fat diet. They didn't tell you what the fat was. That was the secret. But it was way, way higher in sugar. Instead of giving them grains, they gave these rats sugar. So why didn't they conclude that the high sugar diet caused the problems with the brain?
Absolutely. Can we just talk about milk for a second?
Okay.
So we don't, it's very difficult to get raw milk in the UK. There are some places.
Oh, there's quite a few places. Not in Scotland, but in the UK, if you go to our website, realmilk.com.
Realmilk.com. Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me, why is there this war against real raw milk? They started this whole pasteurization business. What is it? Why is it simply down to the fact that they can transport it and it won't go off?
Well,
it's all about money.
It's highly industrialized. What it comes down to is that in the conventional pasteurization system, they pay the farmers the same price they got in World War II. It's just an insult, practically. $1.50 a gallon.
Yeah.
And there you go.
Yeah.
And the farmers can't stay in business with this price. So only the great big mega dairies can make it. But if a farmer sells directly to the public, he gets anywhere from $10 to $20 a gallon. And the industry does not want to compete with this. They don't want to pay the farmers more. That's what it really comes down to.
Just as simple as that. There's some people that argue that a cow that makes milk for its baby is not something that human beings should be consuming, and that's what causes a whole host of allergies and complications and dairy intolerance. And what do you think about that?
People all over the world for thousands of years have thrived on the milk from cows, goats, sheep, camels, water buffalo, yaks. It gives them an advantage, actually, because they always have this healthy food right with them. What ruins the milk and makes it allergenic and cause disease is the heat treatment, because the milk proteins are very fragile, and when they're heated, they get warped and twisted, and your body thinks it's a foreign protein, and it causes all sorts of problems.
That makes sense.
Excuse me, I'm trying to get rid of this
notification business.
There we go. Okay.
All right. Okay. So
just to conclude that, when you switch from pasteurized to raw milk, you see such wonderful health improvements, especially in children. And that's what keeps us going. When we started a campaign for real milk, we had about 30 sources of raw milk in the whole country. And now we have over 3,000 listed, and there's many that aren't listed. So you can see it's really grown.
Wow. And I've read the stuff about, they talk about swine flu, avian flu, or whatever it is going into the cow's milk. I mean, it's just ludicrous, isn't it?
Well, they find these little bits of DNA. Who knows what they are? They find it in all milk, pasteurized or raw. But the pasteurized milk, they say it's okay. But the raw milk, they took 2 big dairies in California, raw milk dairies. They shut them down for many weeks. There's a yeah, there's going to be repercussions from this.
Yeah, I worry about this whole bioterrorism that they're doing. They look for viruses and apparently chickens or livestock or cows, and they claim
So,
it jumps from one place to another, but they never seem to isolate any virus. They can't
no,
prove that any workers in these facilities get
no,
infected from this highly contagious
yeah.
so-called virus. I mean,
They
and
haven't
it
done
just,
contagion studies either.
mm,
One of the things they're not telling you is that these animals, these birds, live in a filthy environment. There's a lot of hydrogen sulfide in the atmosphere. They never test for that. And these are places where grown men have to wear hazmat suits to go in there. You don't think that these gases could be making these chickens sick. And the symptoms of hydrogen sulfide poisoning are identical to symptoms of the flu, and they kill these birds. I mean, birds die from them. But to say that this is some pathogenic virus that can transfer from species to species is ludicrous. They've never found this virus, never isolated this virus.
yeah. So, I mean, it's basically filthy mass industrial,
Yes.
farming. That's the problem. It's the fact that these animals aren't being, raised in, a way that's natural for them. They need to have a nice, healthy life out in the fields or on pasture or whatever, not cooped up in cages, swimming in their own excrement,
Yeah.
inhaling ammonia and whatever
Yeah.
hydrogen sulfur. I mean, how is that going to be a healthy animal? I always say, it's not just about eating something that's healthy, but thinking about what that animal ate. And a lot of these animals are eating processed pallets full of aluminium and God knows what else. They're eating stuff that isn't healthy in the first place.
Yeah, cottonseed meal is very toxic, and when the prices go up, they use more cottonseed meal because it's cheap. So, but the interesting thing is that egg prices here, conventional egg prices have gone up almost to $10 a dozen, but the pasture-fed egg prices have stayed the same. They're about $10 a dozen. So you have to ask the question, why don't we just go towards pasture feeding? We have farms here who have really perfected the pasture feeding and having the birds outside all day long.
All right. Well, let's move on to another topic that's, I think, very big and relevant. Soy. Soy's in everything now. What a crop that is.
Yeah,
soy milk. I never knew the little soy could make. I never knew they had little nipples, that you could get milk out of.
Yeah, the soybean is a very toxic bean, and in Asia, they only ate it after a long, careful fermentation, which gets rid of some of the toxins, but not all. It doesn't get rid of the estrogens and the antithyroid toxins. But the Asians traditionally didn't eat a lot of soy, maybe a teaspoon in the Chinese diet, a tablespoon in the Japanese diet, and that's per day. So they didn't eat a lot of soy. And this was in a diet. These were in diets that were rich in iodine, and so it kind of worked. But we've seen what's happened when they give high soy diet to prisoners. They develop thyroid problems. A lot of them got cancer, and they grow breasts because of the estrogen. It's pretty much stopped. I like to think it's because of some of our work, but I think they saw that they had tremendous liability for feeding this kind of diet because the men just got so sick that they couldn't work when they got out of prison. They had to go on disability.
Well, and the soy, like you said, yeah, it's an endocrine disruptor, or it mimics estrogen. It messes with things like vitamin B12.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And infants on soy formula have 13,000 to 22,000 higher levels of estrogen in their bloodstream than infants on milk formula. And, little boys, for the first 6 months of life, they go through a period when they have testosterone levels as high as an adult male. And that programs them to express male characteristics at puberty. And if this is, contra or wiped out by all this estrogen, then they may not go through a normal puberty.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, over the years, the age for menarche, like young girls getting their first period,
lower
is
and
getting
lower, yeah.
is getting lower and lower. It's crazy. I
Well,
think
and there were a lot of reports of these babies developing breasts at 3 years old who'd been on the soy. Now, the use of soy formula has declined. It's been cut in half. And it's not being pushed anymore because of, I think, the work that we did. And they're not, soy milk is a bust. Nobody, at least in the States, is buying soy milk. They're all buying oat milk.
what do you think of that?
Yeah, well, that's got its problems too. Oats are high in oxalates, and it's not oat milk, excuse me, almond milk, or almonds are very high in oxalates, so it could cause kidney stones. All of these milks are fake. They have anti-nutrients like oxalates and phytic acid in them. They
Seed
there's
oils?
a lot of sweeteners in them and emulsifiers. You know, they're just not real food.
So we've got a TV program here that I kind of enjoy, but not so much recently. It's called The Great British Menu. It's been running for about 20 years. It's really quite fun. And so they split the UK into different regions, and they have 4 chefs per region. And the chefs compete across the week. They make a starter, a fish course, a mains, and a dessert. And as the week progresses, it gets filtered down to just 2. And then they have to cook for a set of judges, and whoever is the winner goes through to the final, and then there's a massive banquet, and then they're crowned the champion, Great British Menu champion, chef. And it's quite an honor to get it. And this year they introduced that the starters have to be vegan.
Oh my goodness.
Right? It has to be completely vegan. Okay. And it's like, why? Why does this happen? They don't explain it. But it's, obviously because of sustainability and climate change and God knows
Oh, well, vote
what.
with your feet and don't watch.
Now, what I find really hilarious is the chefs will say, yes, I've got this vegan cheese. And I'm thinking, well, it's not cheese.
Yeah.
It's not. Why are you calling it cheese when it's clearly not? What? And then, or vegan meat and vegan milk and vegan this, like, I find the whole vegan industry quite funny. Why do they try and emulate other products which they clearly are not? Why can't they just stick to just vegan stuff?
Well, there's so much more profit in plant-based foods than animal-based foods, and that's why it's being pushed. Also to make us sick.
Yeah.
A lot of money in sickness.
So with a lot of the vegan foods that are being sold, they have a lot of soy still in them, by the way.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. Over here they are.
Well, it just sort of became a dirty word here.
Really?
Yeah. You just don't even see soy milk anymore.
Yeah, I'm not talking so much soy milk, but
what is in the food, yes.
Exactly.
There's a lot of protein drinks, and they're pea protein or oat protein or whatever, and these are also highly processed, and they're very bad for the kidneys. Yep. If you have kidney disease, the first thing they tell you is no protein powders. And you can eat too much protein, and these drinks are really high in protein. They're a real strain on the kidneys.
You know what? I'm really glad you've talked about this, because I was going to come to this topic about protein shakes, and I've looked into it, and it seems like it's always they find some way of utilizing waste products. So
yes.
The protein from the peas, I mean, we're talking about like the pea waste from whatever processing that's taken place. And they thought, what do we do with all of this? Why don't we just rehash it?
With whey powder. See, whey is a waste from making cheese.
Yeah.
And the industry doesn't know what to do with it. Now, on a farm, a mixed farm, we have a dairy farm, and we feed the whey to our pigs. Free food for the pigs, and they're very healthy pigs.
Yeah.
So we have an Amish cheese plant south of us, and they actually have a pipe that goes 1.5 miles back into the farm country with little spigots on it. So they can take that whey, they pump the whey back, and they can take it and feed it to their pigs or the chickens. And that's a very good use for the whey. It's very nutritious when it's the natural liquid whey. But once you powder it, you've turned it into something that's really quite toxic.
Yeah. Okay, all right, perfect. So we always talk about the problems. We always talk about problems, and I think it's good to talk about solutions. You've also talked about, the 11 principle, dietary principles. Can we go through that? Do you want me to put a prompter up a slide, or do you remember them?
I'm not sure I remember the quite order, but
Yeah, I can put it up here. Here we go.
Okay.
Let me help you out here. Because I think this is important. Because you know what? People have forgotten, you'd be surprised how many people I meet who don't actually cook. And I'm not talking about people who are disadvantaged and struggling or lower socioeconomic class. I'm talking about lawyers and doctors and surgeons. They're too busy. Everything comes out of a packet. They go for a treat to McDonald's.
Well, that's the first principle. No processed food. No processed food.
Yeah.
All refined and denatured foods. Second one is to include animal foods in the diet. You absolutely need them. And the third one is about nutrient density. Emphasize nutrient-dense foods, organ meats, animal fats, eggs, raw dairy, shellfish, fish liver oils, and fish eggs. I eat fish eggs once a week, and they make me feel so good.
Where'd you get your fish eggs from?
Well, our market sells a little 2-ounce jar of what they call whitefish caviar, very cheap caviar, and it's $10. And so I indulge once a week in caviar.
All right, I'm going to look for that. Can I just say something with the fish as well? You have to be so careful. So one of my supporters sent me some gift vouchers, and I thought, great. And I looked up, Dorset Meat Company, and I thought, let's get some fish. And I ordered some trout, river trout, and I thought, great. But then I thought, let me just check. They don't vaccinate this, do this? And to my horror, because I thought salmon in the UK is all farmed, and they vaccinate the fish. And I thought, river trout, there's no way they vaccinate the river trout. And then I rang them up, and they went, yeah, the river trout is vaccinated.
How did they catch them to vaccinate them?
You can find it on YouTube. There's YouTube little videos to find them. The fish goes on a conveyor belt. They inject it and then goes back. It's insane.
Oh my goodness!
And so the only fish now that I will touch is wild sea fish.
Yeah.
Isn't that sad?
We have a guy here doing totally natural trout.
Right.
It's not farmed, and he makes these lovely little trout cakes that you can order. But of course, they're very expensive.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, I'll look into fish eggs, but again, I need to make sure they're not farmed fish eggs.
Yeah, this is whitefish. I'm not sure. We get a lot of things from the Chesapeake Bay, which is fairly clean, and there's no fish farming in the bay, so we can, we know it's not being farmed. Okay.
And just going back to that, you talk about butter quite a lot. I think it's also important to try and find butter that's pasture raised, and a lot of places in the UK now are using that Bill Gates Bovier for the cows. Have you heard about Bovier?
Oh, yeah. Crazy.
And there might be some links to cancer, and it's just insane. So I think you just have to be so careful.
Using it for long because it makes the cows very sick. They can't digest normally. So the fourth one is eat some animal food raw. Not all your meats raw, but things like oysters or steak tartare. It's good to have some raw animal foods every now and then, and cook most plant foods because they are rendered far more digestible if they're cooked.
Before you move on, I think someone commented as well. What about the fact that some vegetables have defense chemicals? People like Paul Saladino talks about, plants don't want to be eaten, and they've got these defense chemicals, and they're harmful to us.
Well, that's why you cook them, press out the juice, because the chemicals come out in the juice, and then cook them and then put butter on them, because the butter helps you absorb the minerals that have been liberated by the cooking.
There's a reason why everything tastes better with butter.
Yeah. And salt. You want to put salt on your vegetables too.
Yeah. Okay.
And then lacto-fermented condiments and beverages, things like raw sauerkraut, raw pickles, fermented milk products like kefir, yogurt, and fermented beverages like kombucha, which has really taken off here in America.
Same here.
So every traditional culture had fermented foods.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then number 6
kimchi
involves,
as well. There's another one, kimchi.
Yeah, kimchi is a good one.
Yeah.
Your seeds and grains and nuts need to be properly prepared to neutralize anti-nutrients and enhance digestibility. And so many people can't eat wheat today, and that's because they're not preparing it properly. It needs to be a sourdough. The other reason people are having trouble with their grains is, at least in the States, they spray them with Roundup 2 days before harvest as a desiccant. And so you got the full blunt force of the Roundup still there in the grains.
Yeah. Can I tell you, talking about Roundup, I just remember something. Something really sad happened in our household recently. Basically, 2 days ago, all our stick insects died.
All your chickens?
No, stick insects.
Really?
Let me explain why. So we've got cats, they eat raw meat. We've got chickens, they're out in the grass, they eat, pasture, and they eat stuff that we give them. And we've got brilliant eggs from them. They're very happy chickens. Now, our stick insects eat rose petals. No, not petals, leaves. But, we've had quite a long grey kind of winter, and we've run out of leaves to give them. So I went to the supermarket and bought a nice bouquet of roses for my stick insects. And it's the first time. And I cut the heads of the flowers off, put the leaves in, and the stick insects were quite hungry. They munched on the leaves and they all dropped dead. And we think it's because the flowers have been sprayed with something.
Oh, of course, heavily sprayed.
It's the only thing. It's the only thing that can be that's changed. Yeah. Nothing's changed. We've had these stick insects for 2 years, and they've all. It's a massacre. It's a democide. I mean, I've killed them. I'm the government. I've killed my stick insects. Put a bunch of roses
outside, or were they in a cage? Or
they're in a fish tank type thing. Yeah, aquarium. Yeah. But we've had them for 2 years, and they've been fine. And this one time, I bring roses from outside into it. They all died. And I brought my kids around, and they're all looking at it, and I'm like, this is what happens when you eat the wrong stuff. This is what is happening. They spray poison on everything. Mm-hmm. And this is why your dad is banging on about not eating the sweets. That every day there's a birthday, right? Practically at the school. And whenever there's a birthday, the kids all bring in junk food like sweets and garbage. And I tell my kids, we don't eat that. We don't touch it. Right? And they kind of look sad and go, Dad, I didn't take the sweets. I went, good. Or they went, here's sweets, throw it in the bin. And, the other kids at the school gate, the mums and dads, I can hear them. They're saying, okay, do you want to go to McDonald's for a treat? Should we go to McDonald's? And they're all running off. Or the kids, as soon as they arrive, the mums and dads give them chocolate bars and
I know. Coming home from school, I saw that in France. Yeah.
Packets of chips. They're all eating their chips. Over here, it's called crisps. And my kids are always like, oh, Daddy, why are you so strict? And I said, look at these stick insects. This is what happens when you eat the wrong food. And I'm just telling you this because you mentioned glyphosate. And, these roses look really nice, right? Big red.
Yeah.
That was a beautiful bouquet.
No holes in the leaves. Right? No holes in the leaves.
No. Yeah. Wow. Right? Wow. Just goes to show. It's not good for the stick insects, not good for us, is it? By the way, just very quickly, some people are asking, can the vegetable juice be used at all? Like, can you use it at all? Or and do you mean only steam or boil? And, like, don't fry the vegetable? What would you recommend?
Can fry them. I fry a lot of vegetables. I like to fry zucchini and do things like that. And I fry them in lard. It's a nice, stable, saturated fat. And they're delicious that way.
Okay.
This diet is actually quite liberating. There's a lot of things you can do that you didn't think you could do, like fry foods. But you need to use lard or tallow, which is the stable, healthy fat.
I use beef dripping, and I think it's beef tallow. I think it's the same thing. It's delicious. Like if you make chips, homemade chips and beef.
Yeah, we do too. So see, your kids are very lucky.
Yeah, well, we pretty much cook everything from scratch. You know, I'm not kidding. And I actually enjoy it. And I take pleasure in plating up and giving them just...
Yeah, healthy food. And food that's delicious, that they like.
And by the way, thank you for the books that you sent me. And I'm going to start making broths. I haven't made bone broths. I've been nervous about it. But this weekend, that's what we're doing. We're doing that with the kids. So thank you.
Good.
Someone is saying, what about organic salmon? I think we need to be very careful with the word organic because it might still be organically farmed salmon. Am I right?
Yes, it could be. And they're feeding them organic soy and organic grains. Here in the States, we look for the word wild caught.
Yeah.
It's not farmed.
Some people were saying to me that you even have to be careful about wild caught, especially, for example, around the Alaskan, because of that Fukushima, whatever, radiation leak.
Yeah,
apparently a lot of the salmon was...
problem. I think wild Alaska salmon is fine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's where we get ours. And, you know, the funny thing is, I don't know, you probably haven't seen farmed salmon for a while, but the difference in the color. So wild salmon's got this really deep orange.
Right. Whereas, and the farm salmon is white.
Yes.
And they give it a dye, and they have a little color chart where they can pick the color of dye that they want to give. Light pink, dark pink.
Shut up. Are you serious?
Yeah. They get these color fans.
No way. I thought it was just a lighter pink.
We have an article about that on our website on how they put the color in the salmon. It's something called astaxanthin.
Oh my God.
It's a kind of keratin that they give them. It's supposed to be natural.
Wow. It's like seed oils. Like I didn't realize and appreciate it's normally gray. It's like this gray glue.
Oh, when the seed oils come out, they're very dark, like dark brown.
Right.
And they stink to high heaven. You would never touch them. And then they go through a process of cleaning them up that involves 4 or 5 heat treatments. And the deodorizing heat treatment is really high. And these oils are fragile to begin with. And they use the same equipment as oil refineries do. These places, they're refineries, basically, oil refineries.
It's insane.
I know. And you have something that doesn't smell, and they've actually put some antioxidants in to keep them from breaking down even more. But then they tell you to cook with them. There's nothing worse that you can put in your body than a seed oil. It's very worse than sugar. It
smells because it's rancid, basically.
Right. Yeah.
It's rancid. And again, it comes back to, they deodorize it, they color it, they use hexane. And like
when
I
they're
said,
all finished, the oils are clear. But then they add a little yellow dye. So you think about butter. It looks nice,
So over here in the UK, there's this big push amongst, so I like going to food fairs, food festivals.
Yeah.
And I'll look them out. There was a time when I used to look them up and drive, even if it meant 50 miles, and we'd go. And the whole point was to explore some local cuisine and get local honey and, that kind of stuff, artisan stuff. And everywhere I started seeing cold pressed rapeseed oil. Oh. And it was, whether it's the Chiltern Hills or some other area, but the bottles were essentially the same. There's gold labeling and it looked very nice, very pretty, cold pressed, whatever. And I rang the company that makes these up and I said, do you still do the same refinery as other seed oils? And they said, we'd get back to you. And then they didn't. So I rang them the next day and I said, can you please clarify? Do you use the same treatments? And they didn't want to answer. They said, no. We can't comment. And they were just doing the same nonsense, but packaging it as like,
and then selling it as a healthy local food.
Yeah. It's just so sinister. Anyway, let's move on. Enjoy saturated fats
and avoid industrial seed oils. So butter, tallow, lard, coconut oil, bacon fat, and palm oil too is saturated, much safer than the seed oils.
Yep.
And then the 8th one is about a balance of omega-6 and omega-3. And the way you do that is to get off all the seed oils, because they're all omega-6, and have a balance of land and sea. So it's good to eat seafood. Yeah.
Problem is getting nice, healthy
Good seafood. Yes.
Yeah. It's really hard. It's really hard. I mean, you can go to the fish market in London, but it's a massive long trek. You know, just it's hard, I guess. Can I quickly ask you something? What about the vegetable juice? Can you use that to make the gravy? So, you know, when, say, for example, you're steaming.
I don't think it's a good idea. All the anti-nutrients are going to come out in that juice.
Okay.
Use broth to make gravy.
Okay. Right. That's pretty clear cut. And then what about the next slides? We've got some more. Oh, I need to come out of this. Hold on a sec. Go back here.
Lift it up somehow.
Yeah, I need to lift it up. Use unrefined salt. Oh, can I quickly go back? So coconuts, you've added coconuts there, so that's good. Any other thing? So if there are vegetarians out there or vegan, is there any other thing other than coconut that you can use? I mean, I guess olive oil is good. Olive oil?
Olive oil is okay. It's not a saturated fat, though.
Okay.
But it's fine for salads.
Yeah. Okay. So salt.
So number 9 is use unrefined salt, and you can use salt liberally. We need salt. This idea that we should only have 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt per day is dangerous, because we actually need at least 1.5 teaspoons of salt a day to satisfy our requirements for sodium and chloride. And 100 years ago, we were eating 3 teaspoons of salt per day because we had so much salted meat and so forth. So nothing wrong with salt, as long as it's unrefined. The refined salt has aluminum in it, so that's not a good thing.
Why has the refined salt got aluminum in it?
It's anti-caking. Keeps it from sticking together.
Oh, for God's sake.
Yeah.
And aluminum is toxic.
They figured out how to ruin everything.
They do, don't they? You know, there's one thing I've got against Mr. Price Weston. Do you know that? Weston Price.
Yeah.
There's one thing I've got against him. And in one of his videos, he goes, and the primitive diet. And I'm like, they're not primitives. We're primitives.
Yeah. Well, actually, the word most people used in those days was savage. They called them savages. And Dr. Price never did that, to his credit. He called them primitive people because that's what they were.
I know, I'm just being, you know, but you know what I'm saying? I think we're the ones who are actually backward.
More politically correct, I guess.
Yeah, we're so primitive now. Like, you know.
Our diets are.
Can you imagine, in like 500 years from now, people looking back and going, what the heck? You know, I went to Texas a year or 2 ago. I can't remember now. It's all a blur. 2 years ago, I think. And Sally, I was so disappointed. You know, as I came out the plane, there were 13, 14, 15 people waiting with wheelchairs.
Yes.
And all these massive people came, sat down in the wheelchairs. And what was insane was the people pushing these massive people were also massive. So you had these massive people pushing massive people in wheelchairs.
And you see a lot more of that in the South, I have to say. You see a lot more obesity in the South.
It was insane. And then as I walked through the airport terminal, I was just clocking all the food outlets. And you have to give it to them. The alchemy is incredible, because with processed white flour, fructose corn syrup, and seed oils, they seem to be able to concoct a whole load of... Yeah. From pizzas to burritos to hot dogs. Yeah. What I'm trying to say is the alchemy is incredible.
Yeah.
And everybody was eating and drinking at these massive boxes and beakers.
And all the caffeine, which is really, I conclude that under processed food, really. It's really hard on the adrenal glands.
Coffee,
yeah.
Oh, we'll come to that in a second. Right. So with regards to salt, I use Celtic sea salt.
Yeah.
Someone told me Himalayan salt can be quite high in, I think it was fluoride. I'm not sure if that's...
No, it's high in iron. That's why it's pink.
Okay.
So there's nothing wrong with it. You're not eating a lot of this salt, It's not like you're eating it by the cupful. So
Exactly. But like the raw granules, big crystals, or sea salt, that's what you want. What you don't want is this, processed table salt business.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I look back, Sally, and I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to sidetrack for a second. You might enjoy this, right? So I was born in Scotland, in Glasgow, very poor, deprived area of Glasgow. It's post-industrial. All the shipyards have closed down, the steel, mills, all that kind of stuff. It was just a wasteland. It was just not good. And my parents had come over from Pakistan, and I've got a great memory. I was born in 1975. I remember things from when I was 3 years old. And my parents were really slim, right? They've come over, and I remember breakfast used to be omelets, fried eggs, boiled eggs. It would be with a paratha, which was like a wholemeal type flatbread cooked in butter. My mum used something called ghee, clarified butter.
Yeah.
And my parents were lean, we were healthy, and it was great. And then from the 1980s, I remember the first time they brought a microwave. I remember the first time they got the VHS cassette deck thing. I remember when the ghee went out the window and we got a vegetable oil bottle. I remember when the parathas went out and the cereal boxes came in. I remember when my mom said, "Oh, eggs are bad for us. We can't eat eggs." Nigella something, or somebody said that curry, I think it was curry, some minister said eggs are bad. So eggs went out the window. So now, and then they started putting microwave stuff in the microwave. So they're, oh, look, Findus crispy pancake, whatever, chicken, chicken curry, something, Findus crispy pancake, all this stuff. They also got rid of the ghee and butter and replaced it with margarine. So you got vegetable oil, you got margarine. And guess what? My parents ballooned. My parents got diabetes. Guess what? Little skinny Ahmed, and there's pictures of me, and I was really nice and trim. I was a chubby kid through my school years. And by the time I got to my 40s, I was type 2 diabetic, had hypertension, fatty liver. My dad got diagnosed with cancer. And when my dad was dying of cancer, one day he said to me, "What are you doing, son? Look at you. You work all hours. You're eating at 10 o'clock at night. Look at you. You look sick as a dog. You're overweight. You're fat. You're diabetic. Take it from me, a dying man. You need to sort yourself out." So about 6-7 years ago, my wife and I decided we've had enough. And we thought we need to turn things around. And, we started fasting every day. We then got rid of all the processed foods. We stopped using the microwave, kicked out all the seed oils, went back to cooking everything using, animal fats, high animal protein fat diet. Try to eat as seasonal as possible. And, I've lost all the weight. I've got rid of my diabetes and my hypertension and my fatty liver. And my wife and I are the trimmest and healthiest we've ever been. And she's white English, but even she recalls having a similar journey, and her parents and her.
That would make a great little article or letter for our journal.
Okay.
Yeah. Please write it up and send it to us.
But I promise I will. I can't say no to you. Of all people, I can't say no to you. But what I'm saying is, my parents went from their ancestral diet, and adopted the Western diet. And as soon as they did so, everything went to shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel very fortunate. My mother always used butter, and she was a good cook, so we had real food. We didn't have liver, though. We didn't have raw milk. We didn't get cod liver oil. And so we all had some health problems, but we were fundamentally healthy. And my father had 13 grandchildren, which is very unusual for a man of his age.
13. Wow.
And I'm sure it's because as a family, we always ate butter.
Wow. So apparently there's a comment that there's a 2017 report that found that 84% of the 2,238 school fruit items tested contained at least one pesticide residue, and 66% contained multiple residues, with as many as 13 different chemicals. And I know these chemicals are toxic because we've got fields opposite our house. And I remember once walking in the fields with my family, and suddenly over the hill, because it's quite hilly where we live, this big tractor came with sprays. And we were like, "What is that?" And suddenly the wind just blew it. And we could barely breathe.
Gee.
We had to run, and I had my little babies with me, and we're running away from this machine and this fog of chemicals. And I was thinking, what the heck? We eat that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
So some people say that it's quite good to soak fruit and vegetables in bicarbonate soda to get rid of the pesticides, because the pesticides...
Another thing you can use is...
What do you think of that?
Well, yes, or you can also use hydrogen peroxide. But that will only get rid of what's on the surface.
Yeah.
So a lot of them are systemic and they're inside. So it's really best to try to buy organic if you can. And local doesn't necessarily mean organic. You have to ask, right? Hopefully 100%. They'll tell you the truth.
Hopefully. Right.
I just wanted to quickly finish the last two principles.
Yeah, I'm going back there. Yep. There you go.
Number 10 is about bone broth, and we're the bone broth people, because what bone broth is basically is melted collagen. And it nourishes your own collagen. Half of the proteins in our body are collagen proteins. So learn to make chicken broth and beef broth and make soups and sauces, and then you'll have a reputation as being a wonderful cook. And the last one is prepare for pregnancy with nutrient-dense foods, especially liver, raw milk, butter, before pregnancy, during lactation, and then for your children during the period of growth. And the first weaning foods, 4 to 6 months, you breastfeed, of course, and the first weaning foods are egg yolk and pureed poultry liver. This gives them the fat-soluble vitamins.
So I'll be honest with you, I love chicken liver.
Yeah.
But I have beef and lamb liver in my freezer, and it's been there for about 5 to 6 months.
Uh-huh.
And I'm nervous about eating it.
Well, I like to do a stir fry. So you cut the liver in strips, you soak it in milk or lemon juice, and you dry it off. And you quickly fry it in lard or tallow. Move it to the side, fry up the onions, move it to the side, and serve that with mashed potatoes. Delicious.
Okay, I'll try that. Mm-hmm. So you soak it in lemon juice?
Lemon juice or milk. It gets rid of the... there's a strong flavor in liver. Yeah. Especially lamb's liver or beef liver.
Yeah, exactly. Because I tried it once. I tried the beef liver once, and I was like, oh, this isn't like chicken liver. What happened here? But I know it's good for you, so I'm going to try. But yeah, this is what we're going to be working on over the weekend.
Oh, okay. Have fun.
Nourishing broth. I'm going to try all these sauces, because sauces are what make things, don't they? Like if you
they
have
are,
a lovely
and
sauce.
If they're made with real broth, they're healthy. They actually help you digest your food.
Yeah. Okay, can we sidetrack? I won't take up too much of your time, just maybe another 25 minutes or so, if you don't mind. Is that okay? You good for time? That was like a...
Okay. That's a long interview.
I'm sorry, I go much even longer, believe it or not. So basically, look, what are your concerns about 5G?
So I actually wrote a book on this called The Contagion Myth, and where I outline my theory. It's not just my theory. It's that this whole COVID business, and I'm not saying that they just had the flu, that people were really sick and desperately sick in some cases.
Yeah.
Travels across the globe as they rolled out 5G. And the first place they rolled out 5G was Wuhan, China, where they turned on 10,000 base stations one day. And when you see the films people took, some people just collapsed on the ground and were twitching and like they had seizures and things. And then it moved to Spain and Italy, where they rolled out 5G. San Marino has the most 5G in the world and the most COVID cases. Moved to France, moved to the UK, then New York, big cities in America. So it just followed the rollout of 5G. And this is not surprising when you look back in history. So when they rolled out the telegraph along the railroad lines, people got sick. It was called telegraph disease.
Yeah.
and people got really sick. And then radio was rolled out in 1918, especially at military bases. Guess what happened in 1918? The Spanish flu. And so you can correlate these outbreaks of what they call flu with the rollout of these various electromagnetic devices. Now, the body adjusts. I had COVID. I was in an airport, well, actually several airports traveling, and when I got home, I had to go to bed, and I was in bed for a month. I was really sick from COVID. And now I can walk through airports with no problem. But I do think the body adjusts, just like we've adjusted to radio and we've adjusted to radar and all that. I say most people adjust, not everybody. And one thing that helps you adjust is lots of saturated fat, because you need saturated fats to make the surfaces at the inside of your cells, and that's where water structures itself on these smooth hydrophilic surfaces, and saturated fat's the best way to make these surfaces. And that's your wiring in your body. And if you want good, crisp wires going through your body, you want a lot of saturated fat in the diet.
100%. Listen, I don't discount that theory. I think 5G, EMF, toxicity, huge problem.
Yeah, and this is
Wi-Fi.
why it's such a bad idea to let children have cell phones, to have it in the schools. You want all your schools wired, and you can wire your house so you don't have Wi-Fi. There might be Wi-Fi coming into the house, but then you can turn off your Wi-Fi and have it run through a wire to where your computer is, and you just plug in. That's what everybody should be doing.
If you look here, I don't know if you can see this cable.
Yes.
That's the internet.
Yeah.
So
and
exactly.
Certainly you should turn it off at night. You don't want to sleep in it.
Yeah, 100%. Poor Arthur Furstenberg passed away
died,
recently.
By the way.
I know, he just passed away. God bless him. The invisible rainbow. I think the fact that it's invisible is the goddamn problem. If we could see the pollution, we would be absolutely gobsmacked.
Well, there's a big correlation with solar flares too. It's not just man-made.
Okay.
And when there's a big solar flare, you have a lot more flu. And that's what influenza means, influence, the influence of the stars. That's what people used to think it came from the stars. Well, there's an element of truth in this, because the sun's a star and you have these flares. There's some really neat graphs showing this correlation. So it's not like human beings have never had this kind of influence before. We have. And our bodies are amazing. They can adjust. If they're well nourished, they can adjust.
Okay. What about iodine? What do you think about taking iodine?
Well, I think you have to be a little bit careful. I think it's better to put it on your skin, because if you've got enough, then your skin won't absorb anymore. I think iodine patch is better.
Okay.
Because you can overdo an iodine. And by the way, I just read this. You need vitamin A to actually use iodine. So that's where your butter and your cod liver oil come in. Otherwise, the iodine is just, running around in your body and has nothing to do, and it can be toxic.
I don't have a problem getting butter. Like, we use a lot of butter. We
do too in our household.
With 3 kids, and my wife and I, and a cook. I kid you not, I think we go for a block of butter every day.
Yeah.
It's insane. Anyway, listen, I can sense you're getting tired. I don't want to abuse your time. I've got 2 questions.
Okay.
Number 1, can you please come back and talk about some others?
We'll do it again. Yeah.
I'd love that. We haven't talked about things like vaccines and there's other stuff.
Yeah. Don't get me started.
And plus, I'll feedback how the broth went. I'll let you know how that has
Yes.
come along.
Okay.
And I love cooking, but I haven't used my beef liver and lamb liver yet, except once, and it was a bit of a disaster. I cooked it too much. I'll be honest with you as well. I overcooked
the stir fry. I mean, you are just cooking it for less than a minute on each side.
Yeah, I
very
did
high
that.
heat.
Well, see, the other thing as well is I didn't cut it into strips.
Yeah.
It was just a big block, and I think that was a mistake.
No, that's not going to work.
The other thing as well is I am guilty of sometimes to make the gravy using the gravy granules, and I need to make my own gravy
that's
completely.
Going to be MSG.
I know. I'm being honest. Yeah. I'm being honest with you. I'm not going to lie. I still use, the fat from the chicken or the lamb, and, we sieve it from all the herbs, and then we add some corn flour and then maybe some gravy granules to thicken it up. But I want to get away from all of that stuff and stick to natural. Anyway, right. Yeah, sorry, you're going to say.
And actually, you'll find, rather than making gravy, you'll find making reduction sauce. It's much more delicious, much lighter, easier to digest.
True. Agreed. Someone is saying it's regarding turning off your Wi-Fi. It doesn't help much if you live in a terrace or a condo or
I know.
But my understanding is it's also about distance. So the further away you get from the source, there is a reduction.
Diminishing square law. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's better than nothing.
So, for example, I had a story of a family, and they couldn't sleep at night, and it turned out their bedrooms were right against a wall where on the outside were all the smart meters.
Ah.
So what they did was move their bedrooms, and then they could sleep.
Right. Perfect. Makes sense. Right. Final question. You're on your deathbed, Sally. Could be
I'm
next
on my
week.
deathbed?
You're on your deathbed, and you're going to be passing away and meeting your maker. Now, before
One
you
of these
do,
days, yeah.
You've got all your loved ones around you, all your beautiful children and grandchildren. Before you die and meet your maker, what words of wisdom and advice are you going to give them? Other than telling them to read your books and follow what you say.
Eat the traditional diet. Eat traditional foods. Eat the way we've taught you.
Otherwise, you end up like the stick insects.
And I would also tell them not to drink coffee.
Why?
Coffee is like a hammer to your adrenal glands. It wakes you up without feeding you. And pretty soon your adrenal glands give out. And then you can have some really serious problems.
We don't want that.
You don't want that.
I'm down to 2 little coffee beans a day now. So we have
I'll
a coffee.
tell you a great substitute.
Tell me.
You put a tablespoon of coconut oil in a mug and a tablespoon of molasses and a pinch of powdered ginger, and fill that with hot water. And it tastes good, and it's a great substitute for coffee, and it will wake you up by boosting your metabolism.
But the molasses is sugar.
Well, it's just a tablespoon.
It's going to break
minerals.
It's going to break my.
It's a natural sweetener.
It'll break my fast. What I'll do is I will try it, but I'll have to do it later in the day then. So I have 1 meal a day. I fast 20 hours every day, and I know
I have 2 meals a day.
That's fine. I think that's fine. But you don't need to be eating all day long. This idea that you need to graze small amounts all day.
Yeah, no, you need to let your body rest from digesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what 2 meals do you have a day? Is it breakfast and lunch, or lunch and dinner?
Breakfast and a late lunch is what I do. And I don't eat at night. I haven't eaten at night for 10 years, actually.
Yeah. I would say for me it's close to like 7 years now. I just find it really difficult. It's very, very hard. I'm not going to lie. It's not been like I've never had food late at night, but probably about 5 times in the last 6-7 years. And whenever I do, I kind of regret it.
No.
But a lot of
people are taking me out to dinner. I'll eat dinner, of course.
Yeah, it's just, social events and stuff quite often are late. And I don't know about you, but I'm getting ready to go to bed by 9, never mind start eating at 9. It's just like, what? Anyway, listen, I just want to say thank you so much.
Thank you.
We had planned this in December, and your lovely husband, your best friend, passed away.
Yes,
he is now with the maker. I don't think it's anything
and I do want to add, he was 98 years old, so he lived a good long life. Ate lots of butter. He ate more butter than I ate.
Well, Sally, I also don't fear death. I think one of the things we've lost from our primitive state is the respect
the contact with the spiritual world. Yeah, and I've gotten lots of messages from him.
Really?
Some have been quite funny. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, I've had interactions with my dad in the dream
And I have
world.
too. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you're blessed. Well, listen, God bless you.
So,
Thank you so much.
WestonAPrice.org is our website. That's WESTONAPrice.org. And my website, although I haven't written a blog in quite some time, is nourishingtraditions.com.
Great.
All right.
You have a lovely day.